Hello everyone, and welcome once again to the vast and ominous comic book vault. It's time for new acquisitions. I'm Captain Logan.
And I'm Dan.
Dan, today we have kind of an unusual assortment of books, partly because you and I have more solo stuff than usual. Dan and I are going to spend a lot more time today talking separately than together, because we only have 3 books that we both read. And part of that, too, is because we have a couple books that we needed to do this week that Dan wasn't able to get because his store had a problem, and they lost like a whole bunch of books, and they couldn't get it all. They couldn't get everything delivered. So we will not this week, unfortunately, because of that, be reviewing Guardians of the Galaxy. Part of that one too is because for some reason I didn't get Guardians either. I've got to get that. And also we won't be reviewing Ninja Turtles this week. Was there anything else?
The only other book that would have been reviewed was Wolverine the X-Men 28, which was one of my solo books. So all of those books will be in next week's show.
Yeah. So next week will probably be front-loaded with some more books from this week, and I imagine that show will be a little bit longer. But that's okay, because I think this week is likely... I should never say this with our show, but I think this week is likely to be a little bit shorter, because I think we only have, like, maybe 10 or 11 books to review this week. So we're going to start off this week with, of course, our stuff that we're reviewing together, and we're going to start with Uncanny X-Men number 5. Dan, I can't believe we're only on number 5 of this book. I feel like this has been going on forever. Like,
I know. With the 2 X titles that Bendis is writing being so, or feeling so interconnected, and it feeling like one story, it's weird to only have a number 5 on the cover of this book. Especially the one that's named Uncanny.
Yeah, and because it's coming out twice a month, just like all new is.
Yeah, exactly.
So this issue goes to a place I didn't expect to go this early, and it focuses mostly on Magic, who's a character I know zilch about, and having read this, I still know basically zilch about. Now, that's not a discredit to this book. That's me not being used to the whole Magic thing in Marvel. I'm not used to seeing Dormammu, except for what little he appeared in the animated Spider-Man show in the 90s. I remember him from that. By the way, why in that show is he like controlling Carnage? This is the weirdest idea ever.
Yeah, it's very weird. The fact that he's just like a floating head, and like Carnage is like in cahoots with Baron Mordo and stuff. It's like, this is very weird.
Yeah, it was bizarre. But anyway, so that's my extent of knowledge of that guy. But anyway, so Dan, a lot of this review, at least from my side, is going to be me asking you questions, because there's stuff I don't know. First of all, the art in this I think is really interesting.
It is really interesting. Fraser Irving is the artist on this. I don't know if he's going to be the rotating artist on this, because the thing Marvel's been doing to get their books out so fast is to have an artist do an arc, like draw it ahead of time, put it out, and then have a different artist do the second arc, and they'll switch off between them. So I don't know if this guy's going to be the regular rotating artist. But I think for this material, he was very well suited.
I think so too, and I get the sense if you're right about that, and they're rotating by arc, I get the sense that he's probably going to be on for at least a couple more books. Like I would be very surprised if this whole Dormammu thing, was done in 2 issues. Like, I kind of imagine this will be a thing for a minute, but maybe not. I don't know. But anyway,
I'd like to think so, because like just perceiving this as a big Doctor Strange fan, whenever Dormammu shows up, it's kind of a big deal.
It's like me with Galactus. Like, oh my god, it's
exactly.
Galactus.
He's like the magical equivalent to Galactus, I suppose. Like, whenever he shows up, it's a really big deal. So hopefully Bendis is gonna. At least on my end, I'm really excited to see Dormammu here. So I'm hoping this lasts for a little while, and we get to see a little bit more of the Dark Dimension in the X-Men.
So Dan, real quick, if you don't mind doing this for me, I want to try and experiment with this issue, and because I read this, and I really think that if you give our audience a plot synopsis, I'll understand more about what I read in this book. Would you mind telling me, who read the book already, what happens in this issue, Dan?
So basically, what happens? I'm not too familiar with Magic's character either. All I know is that she's Colossus' sister and she has magic powers. But basically, what happens in here is she's connected to this sort of limbo dimension, and that's where her powers come from. I think that's her mutability. She's able to tap into the demon magics and stuff.
Yeah.
And her powers were damaged by the Phoenix Force, and that's causing a bunch of chaos in the limbo dimension. That's where her powers were affected, because previously we hadn't thought that there was any sort of extent of like the Phoenix Force damaging her, because remember, she was still really powerful and everyone was wondering why at the beginning of when this book started. So we find out that there was an effect, and it wasn't just with her, it was the dimension that she's supposed to be ruling over was greatly affected because her power isn't keeping things under wraps as well. So Dormammu comes in and he wants to conquer her dimension and take over. And that's basically him invading her space is what's causing all the problems in her head and all that sort of thing.
Yes, it's a social commentary on getting too far into someone's personal bubble. Okay, so I guess I got more of what was going on than I thought I did. I guess what I'm confused about is how that could be a mutant power. I'm kind of weird in my head.
I'm not really sure how that works either.
Okay, cool. So we're confused about the same thing. I really like how, well, I guess we say this every week. Bendis has a great voice for every character, and Dormammu is no exception. He knows how to write this guy, and I was sort of surprised by that, because he's different from the norm of... Bendis doesn't do a lot of occult, usually. Or am I smoking something when I say that?
He had Doctor Strange on New Avengers.
Yeah.
For a long time, and he did stuff with him in there. I know when New Avengers launched, there was some sort of mystical plot going on, as opposed to the Infinity Gem story that was going on in the main Avengers book. But I didn't read it, so I don't really know too much about what.
But I guess what I mean is he's not predisposed to do really big occult stories. Like, he's not like Cullen Bunn, where he's trying to get occult stories in all the time. I'm not used to seeing him do that constantly.
I know he was the guy that wrote the story that transitions Doctor Strange from being not the Sorcerer Supreme to that Brother Voodoo guy. That was a New Avengers story.
Oh, okay.
But other than that, I can't think of anything that was inherently an occult story that he's done.
I thought, just getting back to this issue, that what was done with Angel was kind of nice. It's kind of a quick couple pages, but he just got onto this team, and they play it up for comedy a little bit, where he's like, wow, maybe I didn't really think this through, because it didn't occur to him, oh, I gotta work with Magneto now? And I thought that was kind of fun.
I'm sort of waiting. I thought it was fun, but I'm sort of waiting for Angel to become a full-fledged member of this team, and we're going to start to do some character stuff with him.
Yeah, but he just got there, so it's not a big deal to me.
Yeah, All New will probably deal with it, but now that he's on this team specifically, I'd like this to be the book that deals with him, Because, we only have, a few dialogue scenes of him saying, dialogue sequences like you were talking about, being oh, maybe the repercussions of this choice aren't really all that positive, and we're not even really sure as to why that choice was made on his part yet.
That's a really good point. Yeah, we need to flesh that out. But I do just love that line where he says, and all of a sudden it dawns on me that I'm now going to Magneto's school for gifted youngsters. That's great.
I thought that was interesting, yeah. All of the, Bendis' snappy, witty dialogue is always a good time to read. I think touching on the artwork a little bit, again, because we had talked a little bit about how it suits the material. I'm just not so sure if I like some of the time how this artist draws people's faces and the way they're expressing their emotions at some point.
I know what you're talking about.
We had talked a little bit about I think it was on one of, I think it was the third to last page maybe of actual, not ads, where Cyclops is has this really creepy big grin on his face when he's talking to Magic, and it's drawn in such a way where it looks really disturbing. And I don't know if that's what he was going for, but Cyclops, at least how he's been portrayed so far by Bendis, that's not the intent. He's not supposed to be crazy. There's little hints that maybe he's misguided, and the reader's left up to decide for themselves whether or not they agree with him and his methods and things. But
yeah,
I don't know. In that panel specifically, in some other places, some of the other characters, they just look kind of off.
He's gone to an incredibly serious place, and he doesn't smile as much as he used to naturally. And to suddenly see that, it was jarring to me too. I was like, really? Yeah. It was too boyish for the way he's been portrayed lately.
Right, and I could have maybe seen young Cyclops doing that, but then again, now that young Cyclops knows what he's going to become, he hasn't been doing all that much smiling either. So, not to complain Cyclops smiling, I'd like to see Cyclops happy every once in a while.
Yeah, sure.
I don't know. I'm really sort of intrigued by this plot here. not necessarily the magic stuff, but just to see the X-Men fighting a villain that they've never fought before. It's sort of doing the same thing that we had been talking about, liking in Uncanny Avengers, where we're mashing the Marvel Universe with the X-Men together. In a really interesting way.
That is a big trend right now, and it's really cool to see it happening with an actual full-fledged mutant, and not just, well, we've got to have villains who are outside of X-Men villains because we have people in an X-Men book that aren't X-Men. This is actually facilitated through an X-Men. That's kind of surprising.
Yeah, and I like that Bendis is, like, despite this being, like, the Black Ops, like, ultra dark and... I mean, the tone hasn't been ultra dark and serious all the time. We talked about some little witty dialogue things we had in there, but overall, I think this book is going for a bleaker approach than the all-new book, and we have the X-Men fighting Dormammu. Like, that's sort of an inherently goofy idea. He's like a dude with his head on fire, and it has like a purple costume. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's really cool that Bendis is taking something that's really sort of serious and was a little bit more grounded at the beginning, and giving it a bigger scope within the Marvel Universe and having some fun with it, while at the same time keeping all of the characterizations really rooted in that darker tone and approach that he was taking with this. He's doing an excellent job of walking that fine line between taking it too seriously and, not taking it seriously at all.
Yeah, I think you're right. You might be right that the art isn't quite figuring out that balance, right. but the writing definitely is. Well, let's go ahead and move on to Uncanny Avengers number 7. Is it just like going to be a trend? Are we going to do this every time, where it's Uncanny and Uncanny? Because this is already weird that we had 2 books called Uncanny, but they're coming out the same week a lot. So anyway,
yeah,
I think really that's kind of weird. Funny. So we have the Son of Apocalypse trying to take the place of Apocalypse, but none of the Horsemen want to follow him because he's like 15?
Yeah, and the Apocalypse twins that we had seen Kang taking, they show up in here as well. Those are the 2 characters that sort of usurp his position. And I like that Remender is... It's really interesting how out of sequence he's telling the story, where, like, yeah. we had Kang, like, traveling through time in the previous issues and, like, setting a lot of the things up that happen in here. We have the choice that Thor had made in the previous issue regarding his situation with Apocalypse coming to affect things here. And they mentioned something about Wolverine being involved in this choice-wise that I don't really remember that being revealed yet. So he's even setting things up in this story retrospectively, which is really interesting.
Does it not remind you a lot of the way Hickman plots?
It reminds me of that to a degree. It reminded me a little bit more of just, like, old-school comic book storytelling, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Where, like, this is very Claremontian in the way it's paying off things, like setting things up and then paying them off many issues later.
And doesn't that go really well with Acuna's art here? Because the art in this is, I mean, it's very distinctive, it's very much Acuna's own style, but there's a lot of callback to Kirby. And it's not just straight up trying to do Kirby. I think it's just, like, very subtly homaging that because it's cosmic, and we've got these giant space creatures and big space station looking things, and it ought to look like that. It's Marvel. Like this is one of the most Marvel looking books that I've seen in a while. If that may, like, old school Marvel looking. This is very Silver Age, and even like. And it's kind of written that way in some places too. Like I found myself there was an exchange, especially between Wanda and Wonder Man, where it felt like a 70s exchange. Like, it didn't even seem like the way people talk in 2013, if that makes sense. And not that bad, but it's not inconsistent with the rest of the book. I feel like the whole thing was written that way. And I was just like, this is kind of out of time. Like, if you want escapist stuff and you want to get out of present day and outside of your, regular whatever problems, this is a good book for you right now, I think.
It's interesting in that regard because it's sort of, I think, and this is, again, speaking of how well Remender is playing with the title and the premise of this book, I think it's escapist in that it's written as a homage, in my opinion, to, like, the Jim Shooter era of Marvel, that, like, 80s Secret Wars era, where you have, like...
And even Guardians, even the original Guardians.
Yeah, it's doing that thing where it still can do some inherently goofy things, but the characterizations are written in such a way where they're taken sort of seriously, but it's still got that melodrama to it. It's sort of Claremontian, that sort of thing going on. but then it's addressing current day issues in the things like it talks about with the Red Skull and the degeneration of American society, and it's dealing with that in a very X-Men way. So it's escapist like the Avengers, but sort of in the talking about current day issues like the X-Men should be at the same time.
Although this particular,
like
at least where we're at right now with this particular issue, I don't feel like we're seeing so much social commentary as more comic book commentary stuff, which I also like a lot. You know what I mean? You've got the whole business with like Thor having to deal with actions he took when he was more of a brash young man, and how and that's all playing out in a really interesting sort of way. I love the cliffhanger with this particular issue, and then you've also got. Sure. I'm sorry. The other thing I wanted to mention about comic book commentary, you've also got. And I love it when writers do this. Remender having the characters reflect on the kind of world they live in versus the one we live in. They recognize that their job and also just the crazy comic book world they live in, they could die at any moment, and that they're always thrown into action and stuff. And you have that scene that I can't decide if it's touching or creepy, where you've got. Who is it? There's a girl that kind of comes on to. I'm trying to remember.
To Alex?
It's been a couple days. Yeah. It's Wasp. Yeah. It's been a couple days since I read it. Yeah. Where Wasp comes to Alex and kind of comes on to him a little bit, and it has this kind of seize the moment speech, and I'm pretty sure it's trying to get him to sleep with her, and it was interesting. And it was again it was a commentary on the comic book world they live in. If you were in danger like that all the time, and then that conversation gets interrupted with "we're about to go into battle and probably not make it out alive," and that's all really cool. I like that.
I wanted to mention that exchange too because I sort of disagree. I think in that it didn't have any modern social commentary. I thought that was all over that conversation
I just didn't pick up on it if it did.
Well, she was talking about how she's designing clothes to market this new team to the public.
I forgot about that. Yeah.
And she's talking about how pop culture will ease people into progressive ideas that the society is heading in, but they're not really ready for yet, and that's how they're sort of introduced to them and how they become accepted towards it. And I thought that was a really interesting thing. Which
you're absolutely right about that. Yeah, I forgot. I have to mention that we're shooting this late, and it's been a couple days since I've read some of these, so I forgot about that part. Sure. But yeah, great point. I'm glad you remembered that. What do you think of Sunfire?
Sunfire is a character that I never liked at all in Claremont's run, just because he was kind of abrasive and mean to everyone. And in this book, he's sort of interesting. I mean, maybe something has happened there where, because I haven't read Claremont's run in its entirety because it's, that long. But maybe something happened in between, the initial, when he shows up in Giant Size X-Men until later on where he's likable and is cool, like he is in this issue. But I enjoyed him in here. The actions that he takes are really interesting.
Do you get the sense that this is going to be a rotating team? Because I kind of do. I mean, you got Wolverine not even on the cover of this issue. That's kind of nice. I like that sometimes Marvel recognizes that they could still sell a book without Wolverine on the cover. That's kind of nice.
Yeah, and Captain America doesn't have a big role in this either. He sort of just shows up at the end and has a few little things to say about a big threat coming.
If this ends up being a long-running book, I don't think you're going to see Captain America stay on this team. I think he is going to let Havoc get used to leading the team and wean off of having somebody like Captain America to kind of as his training wheels, and then I think he's going to leave. I hope he is, and I kind of hope that we lose all of the main Avengers off this book. As much as I'm liking the Thor story here, I don't need Thor in this book. I kind of want more second stringers to feel like A-listers in this book, because after all, those guys are already on too many Avengers teams. I guess I kind of want to lose those guys and have this be Havoc's book and Scarlet Witch's book, and then bring aboard and Rogue's book, and bring aboard more people that are sort of second stringers. But because Havoc, we've had this book for 7 issues. That's not a character that I ever read in very much stuff, except for a little bit of X-Men here and there that I've read, and I'm not seeing him as a B-lister anymore. least in the in the context of this book. So I don't need Captain America and Thor here. I can live without them. I don't know if you agree with that, but
right, I agree. I mean, I'm a little bit. I guess I like Thor being in this book a little bit more than you do, just because I think, as of right now, I think it's a really interesting.
I love it right now.
Thing.
No. Actually, I like him in this book right now just as much as you, because you have. It's all your fault, Dan. You've kind of gotten me more and more into Thor. I'm starting to really enjoy Thor, and so I'm liking it when he pops up. I'm finally seeing myself as more. I don't want to say I'm a big Thor fan, but I'm more and more. I'm going, oh, I see why people like Thor. Okay, I get it now. And I don't roll my eyes when I see Thor like I used to, because I didn't used to get him. Now I like Thor a lot. So no. I appreciate getting Thor in books, because then I can learn about him and then I can pretend like I know something about Thor. So that's great. But I'm just saying that if I think eventually I'd like to see those guys not have to be in this book all the time.
I mean, I think Thor has a little bit more of a reason to be there than Cap is, because like Cap is, if you have him on a team, he's the leader, and we have a leader here that isn't him. So why does he need to be there?
He's training wheels. Yeah,
exactly. I feel like Thor is like that to a little bit of a lesser degree. But, yeah, I'd like to see Cap leave, because, I mean, Remender's already getting the chance to write Cap in his own solo book, so, I mean, from a writer's standpoint, I don't think he needs to be writing Cap in 2 books.
And I also don't think this book needs Wolverine, and I think after the first couple issues, it really doesn't. He doesn't seem necessary. I mean, not that nothing's ever done with him, like the first couple issues, you needed him, because I guess for whatever reason, the decision was made that this would be the book where he would deal with the death of Xavier. But after that, I don't think you need him.
Well, it'll be interesting to see, because I know they released a solicit showing that his son Dakin is one of the upcoming Horsemen of the Apocalypse when they show up, and one of the and they had mentioned in here that one of his decisions is going to affect everything. So I think we're going to get a little bit more Wolverine character stuff coming up.
Well, never mind. Yeah, and I mean, like, he can keep selling me on those characters, but
definitely.
We can at least agree, get rid of Captain America as soon as possible.
I agree with you on that. Captain America is a character that I don't really need to see here. The Red Skull stuff they were doing with him was really interesting, and if the Red Skull as Onslaught, I forget that character's name every time we talk about him. If Onslaught shows back up again, maybe they'll do some more interesting stuff with Captain America, but as of right now, I agree with you.
And the last thing I want to say about this, too, now that you mentioned that, isn't it interesting that we're doing sort of like the previous Uncanny X-Men was doing, where we'll have a villain and use him for a while, and then write him out, but then he'll come back, like they did with Sinister, with I can't remember the guy who was writing that book.
Kieran Gillen.
Thank you, Gillen. Yeah, I really like what he did with that. I feel like Remender is gonna do that with Uncanny here too. He's introducing a lot of villains, and he'll write them out, and then it'll be clear that they're going to come back. And I kind of wonder if he's not going to maybe have even like a conglomerate of villains at some point.
Let's count them on our fingers. We've had Red Skull, we've had King the Conqueror, we've had Apocalypse, and who else have we had? There's a 4th one, right?
And of course, we're going to have Red Skull becoming Onslaught, which is almost a different thing entirely. I thought there was a 4th one too, and I can't tell you who it is right now. I think you're right, though. I think there was somebody else.
But anyway, like,
but yeah,
it's really interesting the way I look at it as a Claremontian thing too, where like that, it's not as Claremontian in that like Claremont would introduce something and then like pay it off like 100 issues later. This is setting it up so it's like paying it off maybe like 5 or 10 issues later. It's looking like right now.
But I think that's progress. Don't you feel like to a degree that Marvel now is the way that editorial is treating their writers right now? I really kind of feel like Marvel now is allowing people to go back to something akin to more traditional comic book pacing. And comic book plotting, and I think that's part of why you and I are enjoying it so much, because it's involved in a way that Marvel has not been involved in a few years, I think.
I think it's really interesting that
not all of Marvel, but a lot of
the first major publishing initiative, like line-wide sort of thing that Axel Alonso had as editor-in-chief with Marvel Now, is sort of returning to those roots that Marvel. Because Marvel has always been the sort of thing, if you look at all their characters, they're all based on evolution through sequential storytelling. A lot of the times, the DC characters are like the characters that you don't want to change. You want them to stay static because of the ideas that they represent, and those are really interesting. Mm-hmm. But like Marvel, I want to see them progress from point A to point B as people, and I think it's a little bit harder to do that with story arcs. If instead of just having like a chapter in their life, and I like this way of storytelling a lot more. I agree.
Yeah, let's go and move on to Ultimate Comics Spider-Man number 22. This is a big fight in a hospital. It's Miles Morales versus Venom, and Venom still thinks that Miles' father is Spider-Man, but then he finds out that he's not, so he attacks the actual Spider-Man. And there's a nice exchange, a nice subtle exchange, I thought. Subtle that becomes blatant at the beginning of this book with Miles and what's her face?
Gwen Stacy. Oh, no, Maria Hill.
Maria Hill. Thank you. I always forget Maria Hill's name in this because she's kind of different than she is in the regular universe.
Instead of a Shield agent.
That always messes with my head. Yeah. When she's Shield, I can remember it. But anyway, so there's this whole really interesting exchange there at the beginning where he's trying to figure out how to be Spider-Man, not let anybody know that he's Spider-Man, but she kind of thinks that he is, and then things have gotten so personal for him that he gets to where he just doesn't even care about his secret identity anymore, hardly. And I don't want to give away exactly how that exchange ends, but I was surprised by it and thought it was pretty cool.
Yeah, and it's so atypical, like, to the way Peter Parker would do things, and that's one of the things that we had talked about, I think, a little bit earlier when we were reviewing this book.
Yeah.
Maybe in one of the vaults or when we had been talking about previous issues, but like, no matter how personal things got for Peter Parker, he viewed it as like, to keep it from getting even more personal, he needs to conceal his identity. Whereas Miles here was like, this is getting too personal, I need to take drastic action and throw all caution to the wind, which is, there's valid points to both of those perspectives, and I think Bendis is doing a really good job of like selling you on the way this kid reacts to the situation, because that's a very relatable reaction. Like, if you hear that a hospital with your two parents in it is getting attacked by a monster that you're somewhat responsible for,
that's a situation we can all relate to.
Well, I mean, like, the way that if you were in that situation, you would react, you know what I mean?
Yeah, well, and I think the operative word you used there was kid.
Yeah.
He's 13, he's 14, 13, 14. I mean, this kid is like borderlining on puberty right now. He's not gonna react to this stuff well. That's I think the thing that this book has going for it the most is, can you make a superhero out of a kid this young? I mean, like, the Spider-Man barely applies with this kid, and I think that that's what this issue really is all about. There's too much pressure, and what I think is really interesting is the juxtaposition of he was able to handle fighting a civil war against Hydra better than he can handle a monster is attacking his two parents.
Yeah, that is a really interesting idea. I never thought of that before. And that whole Civil War thing sort of brings me to another point that I wanted to make about how I think this story is going to go.
Absolutely.
Because we have, at the end of this issue, and this has been revealed in solicits and stuff, so I don't think it's that big of a spoiler. Like, they released posters and teasers about, like, where this is headed, of, like, the classic Miles Morales' costume, the trash can, and him walking away. Yeah. We've seen images of that. So the upcoming thing is going to be Bendis doing his ultimate take on Spider-Man No More, issue 50, that whole thing.
Yeah.
And I think, because I had heard, I don't know how true this is or if it's confirmed or anything, that there is going to be a time jump in this book and Miles is going to get older.
Ooh.
So I think these 20-some-odd issues after the Spider-Man No More thing is over, people were complaining about the first Ultimate Spider-Man taking 6 issues to tell Peter's origin. I think this whole run so far has been Miles' origin.
It has been, yeah.
And that Civil War thing inserted into there seems way too not anti-low-key to be in this kid's origin, you know what I mean?
I think so too. It's too much. I think that the way that they're validating a little bit, I think the justification is we don't get to see him in the costume enough during this while he's going through all this like more personal finding himself kinds of stuff, and so at least throwing that in there gives us some action stuff so that you now can't say, oh, we had 22 issues of him not really being Spider-Man. But I still sort of feel like we got 22 issues where he's not really Spider-Man. I mean, like, yeah, he's been in some fights. There's been some action in this book. I'm not saying we haven't had that, but at the same time, there's no status quo for this book. It's constantly jello, and like that's not necessarily a problem. But the time jump excites me because I didn't want another 20 issues of this. Me
either. And we had talked a little bit about before about how, like, I had a little bit of a problem where we're like, this kid, like, it's been this long, almost 2 years on this book. We've been reading this. And this is a Spider-Man book. There's not really a romance in it yet. And, like, that's something as a Spider-Man fan, like, that's such a big part of, like, what I love about the Spider-Man as a concept and, like, the relationships between people. Like, the only relationships that we get to examine here is between Miles' family and, like, his friend, really.
Yeah, and they've already, and Bendis, I'm sorry, I gotta say this real quick, Bendis has already ended, I think, maybe even, I don't know if it was premature or not, but it feels like it compared to what he's done since then. He's already stopped the most interesting relationship we had going on, in my opinion, which was him and the Prowler, because you had that whole really cool thing of his uncle, instead of being the great power, great responsibility like figure in his life, is his arch enemy, and then he gets killed off, and since then I feel like the book I don't think the book's been floundering, but I've been less interested in it because that was the thing that was the idea I latched onto so hard. And at the same time, it's fair if you're gonna parallel Spider-Man, and he's still going to be his uncle, but you're going to turn that on his head? Well, he's got to die early on in his origin. This is the only way you can parallel that. Yeah, that's got to happen, so fair enough. But yeah, I got to tell you, Dan, before you told me I didn't know about the time jump thing.
So I'm not 100% sure if that's happening.
Okay, I hope that's happening because I was very seriously considering dropping this book after this issue. And I'm saying that after praising it quite a bit, obviously. I liked it. But I'm not jazzed about the Spider-Man No More thing, or at least I wasn't when I thought that might be for another 6 or 7 issues, because the way this book has been paced, I was afraid, okay, we open this with 5 issues out of costume, and now what are we going to do? Like, go another 7 or 8 issues where he's not Spider-Man, but thinking maybe he should be Spider-Man? Like, I didn't want to read that. I'm also just, I guess I would have been less annoyed about the whole idea of redoing Spider-Man No More if I felt like that cover hadn't been homaged 20 times in the last year and a half.
Yeah.
So, like, doing the Ultimate version of that is cool because they didn't do that in Ultimate before. So, yeah, okay, fair enough. That's new territory. But we just did at least homages to that in slot stuff. So, like, I couldn't get excited about it.
I mean, you can't read a slot comic that isn't, like, just homages of Spider-Man things most of the time.
Yeah, fair enough.
So, like, it's kind of hard. But I think one of the other interesting ideas in here that we had talking about the parallels with Spider-Man and the uncle thing, and this in sort of a broader sense as being one big story, because I think that's what it is and how you should read it.
Absolutely.
When people end up getting their hands on it.
It's also important, we have to say this before you move on, it's also important that the end of this issue actually definitively says the end at the bottom. Because we've never had that. This has not been in story arcs. I mean, this is a 22-issue story arc for all intents and purposes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think the interesting thing in paralleling Spider-Man here is Peter Parker sort of doesn't really know his parents when he starts out, and they're sort of already, like, depending on what story you go with, they're either dead or are SHIELD agent or have been SHIELD agents and all that sort of thing. I think it's really interesting that we killed his uncle off, and now we're losing the parents and he's becoming an orphan. I think that's an interesting parallel, too.
Yeah, you're right. It is.
Just something I thought of. Bendis is like, because that's not something that's very obvious on the surface either, that's what he's doing. When you're reading it, you're not really thinking about that. You're sort of just engrossed in how this is affecting the kid, but he's making really clever parallels and turning everything on its head, literally.
I think you're right.
But yeah, this book is very slow. I'm not going to say, you know, that it's the fastest paced, most exciting book in the world, but like if you sit down, and this is the problem that I think Ultimate Spider-Man has had since it started, is like if you sit down and read this as a story arc, like if I were to hand you the first 22 issues of this book and you were to read them all the way through, you would have a blast. But if you're reading this month to month and you're waiting for things to go month to month story-wise to progress, and you're spending $4 an issue on it, it can be a little bit difficult to reconcile sometimes.
What I hope is that moving forward, now that we're kind of getting, now that we're going to eventually get past the origin, maybe, my hope is that moving forward, when we actually get kind of a status quo for this character, and I hope that the age jump happens. I think that's a great idea. That Bendis will start doing more what I like to think of now as modern Bendis pacing, because he hasn't been as decompressed over the last year as he used to be, and I feel like he's kind of in this really cool groove right now where it's still Bendis dialogue, it's still kind of wordy but not in a bad way, it's still really dialogue driven, but I feel like he's mastered pacing over the last year, at least in comparison to some of his more decompressed stuff, and this is the book that's still really decompressed, and I'd like to see this start to be paced more like All New X-Men or like Guardians of the Galaxy, something like that.
It's interesting, because I agree with you. All New X-Men seems much more, and the X-Men books in general, that story...
We also get them twice a month. That's important. But
I think one of the things we got to keep in mind in terms of thinking about his masterness of pacing there is he's getting 4 issues a month with that book. Yeah. This book only gets 1.
Yeah, but it's also only about one character. I mean, it's not as involved as X-Men. I mean, like, he's having to do 4 issues a month to get us through about 25, 30 characters right now, Dan. This is about Spider-Man. I think he can do that in 1 issue a month, and I'm not going to argue with him if this is how he wanted to tell the origin, because it's the kind of origin where there really was a story there, so that's good.
Yeah, and it's, again, atypical to Spider-Man's usual origin, like in 616, where it was just like a one-and-done, like not even a full issue origin.
It's now we're
getting it fleshed out for like 2 years worth of comics.
But if I could go back in time, I would have told myself, wait for this in trade. Because reading it month to month is frustrating to me.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sort of with you on that, but this Ultimate Spider-Man is one of those books that it was the book that like introduced me to comics, so if Bendis stays on it, I'm not going to drop it, you know what I mean?
Oh yeah, fair enough. I don't think I'm going to either. I think I just, I had a moment there where my faith was tested, and I think I ultimately I'm going to allow it to have the opportunity to be renewed. Let's go ahead and move on, Dan. What would you like to start us with for your solo stuff?
I would like to start with New Avengers number 5. This is by Jonathan Hickman again, and Steve Epting on artwork.
I still need to catch up and read those. Jeez.
This still continues to be fan-freaking-tastic. I really like this book. The themes that we're dealing with here, we get this character, the Black Swan, who was the woman that the Avengers had thought was destroying the world before for really evil reasons, and now it looks like what she was trying to do was actually a good thing in the grander scheme of things, and Hickman is sort of asking the question, like, the plot of this book is the Avengers saving the world. That's the base idea of it. But he's taking it from a completely different context, where he's looking at it from a grander scheme. He's pulling away and saying, like, if the people that are on our Earth perceive it to be the most important thing in the universe, what if there are alternate universes where everybody else thinks the same thing and no one's looking at the bigger picture, and the fact that they're trying to save just their Earth is destroying everything else? It's a really interesting idea. It has a lot of really interesting ethical questions to ask of the characters, and it's done in such a way where it's grounded in the characterizations, and a lot of this entire issue, in fact, is just conversations between Reed Richards, Black Panther, Black Swan, and Namor. And Doctor Strange is there too. So basically, most of the Illuminati's there, and they're just talking with this woman. And it's asking all these broad, sweeping questions about the nature of reality in the universe and the things that superheroes do on a daily basis to save the world. It's really fascinating stuff. It's atypical to the Avengers book, which I hadn't been enjoying, which was completely plot-driven. This has a really interesting plot, but it's told through the eyes of the characters, and I really like that about it. I can't recommend this book highly enough. I really, really enjoy it. Well, and Steve Epting's art is fantastic, too, as always.
That almost sounds like the natural conclusion to eventually go with all of this, like reality-bending stuff that we get in comic books, right? I mean, it's interesting that I haven't heard of that before, where you have in comics a lot of things about, like, when you're talking about alien species and stuff, like being too Earth-centric and like being kind of self-absorbed about, you're not the only people in the universe, and then to take that in like interdimensional sort of way,
yeah,
it's almost a logical conclusion. That's interesting.
And he uses Galactus as sort of a manifestation of like the selfishness of the people of Earth, where like Galactus is like eating all these planets and stuff, and he's doing it for sustenance. It's like the classic Galactus theme. He's eating them for sustenance, and like. But in this point, it's looking at it even more of a grander scope, where he's not just affecting the populations of that planet; he's affecting the entire fabric of reality. Man. And it's really cool. Like the new Herald of Galactus is in here, and they get to talk to him, and it's just really, really cool.
Dan,
stuff.
I've got to catch back. It is a crime that I'm not reading a book that features
and
Galactus.
Thanos appeared in a panel in New Avengers previously, and this is supposed to be setting up the Thanos-centric event that is coming up in Marvel, so I think you might want to give it a look.
Yeah, I'm going to have to start reading that. Okay, thanks, Dan.
I'm just saying, I think you might really enjoy it.
Don't forget to send me that code, and then I will probably also buy those eventually. Okay, so next up, I'm going to talk for a minute about Deadpool Killustrated, number 4. I love Deadpool Killustrated. This is a really funny book. I kind of hate that it's over now. This is number 4 of 4. Yeah, these are done in 4 parts. Deadpool Kills the Marvel Universe was also done in 4 parts.
Oh, I see.
And this has, I think, every cover has trumped the last one. This one, Dan, has Sherlock Holmes looking at Deadpool comics with a magnifying glass, and then Deadpool frying his head with a magnifying glass.
That's awesome.
What a great cover. This is fantastic. So this is the conclusion to this, and it ends much in the same way that Deadpool Kills the Marvel Universe does, where Deadpool wins basically. He basically, I mean, like I don't feel like I'm giving too much away, because this is about the only way it could have gone down. Where he's trying to destroy the Ideaverse. He's trying to destroy all the precursors that created the archetypes that became the Marvel characters, because he knows that they're fictitious, and so he goes and he kills all the archetypes. And through the books, you get to with different panels, you get to see the way Cullen Bunn interprets who, in classic literature, was the precursor to different characters. And
that was the most exciting thing about when you would review these books. I was just so excited to hear where he thought the influences came from. That just sounds like a really interesting idea.
That continues here. You get Scylla and Charybdis here, which are the precursors to Galactus. That's kind of fun.
That's cool.
And stuff like that. You also get Deadpool versus the Three Musketeers. Actually, the Four Musketeers. And that's kind of fun. And then finally, Deadpool has to face off against Sherlock Holmes and his wacky time traveling companions, where he's gone throughout time, and he's gotten Beowulf. He's got Natty Bumppo and Mulan. Yeah, he got Mulan.
That's awesome.
Deadpool's trying to figure out if Mulan is a girl or not, and it's fantastic. Anyway, so there's an epic showdown in the middle of the Ideaverse, in kind of a time-ish limbo between Deadpool and Sherlock Holmes, who ends up being kind of the hero of the book. And
that's interesting.
And again, I don't feel like I'm giving too much away because this is just the direction this kind of had to go. Deadpool kind of manages it, but he's also confused because he's not dead at the end. I mean, he wanted to die. He wanted to get rid of all of the Marvel universes, and the reason he's still trying to do that is because he's still alive, and he can't die. Nothing can kill him. Not even the destruction of the universes that created his universe. And so we find out that this is actually only the second in what Cullen Bunn is now calling the Deadpool Killustrated, and there is another one that starts, and of course I'll be buying it and reviewing it. There is another one that begins in July called Deadpool Kills Deadpool, and that's how this is going to end.
That's interesting.
Yeah, it's going to end with another, I would assume, 4-part miniseries called, I would assume 4 parts, called Deadpool Kills Deadpool, and I'll definitely be reading that. So I'm very interested to see how if he can trump himself again. I still think that idea-wise, conceptually, Deadpool Kills the Marvel Universe is a better book than this. I think that this book is more clever in a lot of ways. I think it's a more fun read. Overall, it wasn't as thoughtful. It didn't make me think the way Deadpool Kills the Marvel Universe did, and it's also somewhat. I feel like it's somewhat contrary to that book in that it was about comic book panels, and this suddenly we're doing comic books. We're suddenly having to show comic book panels to show you literature, and so it doesn't mesh in the same way. It feels like there's kind of a disconnect perspective-wise. But I don't care because it's great. This is really, really funny. You should totally get this. If you don't like Deadpool, buy this, because I'm not saying it will make you like Deadpool, but I think you'll enjoy Deadpool in this. And again, I'm not a Deadpool fan. This will, I think, go down as my Deadpool. I mean, like, I think I'm gonna go back and look on these. I hope Deadpool Kills Deadpool is great, because I feel like I'm gonna go back and look at these, and when people say, hey Cap, do you like Deadpool? I'm gonna say, well, I like Cullen Bunn's Deadpool, and I don't know.
I generally find Deadpool to be completely unpalatable, but that sounds like something I could get behind conceptually.
I think that is maybe the greatest compliment I could ever pay Cullen Bunn is he made me like Deadpool. So good on you, sir, and I'll definitely be buying Deadpool Kills Deadpool. Go ahead, Dan.
All right. Next, I have Scarlet Spider number 16, and this is I guess we're calling it classic homage to the cover that came out like a couple months ago on Superior Spider-Man number 1. They do this with the Ramos cover for the first issue of Slott's Run, where it's just like Spider-Man like swinging with a bunch of people's faces in the background. They've homaged that cover like 3 times already. So I guess this is going to be the new cover to homage. I hope that doesn't happen.
Which is weird because it already seems like a kind of partial homage to McFarlane, right?
Yeah, I mean, stylistically, Stegman's definitely coming from that realm.
Well, anyway, yeah, weird.
But this issue is pretty interesting. We're finally over that other stuff that had sort of really confused me as to whether or not the other is still in continuity or not. So I'm glad that we're over that. We're still touching on some of those ideas, but in more interesting ways, in that we're getting a major Spider-Man villain involved that I really, really like, and he fits with those ideas and the sensibilities extremely well, and it's going to be interesting to see how Yost connects that with some of the things that have been going on in now classic Spider stories from the 80s where he was the main villain. I don't want to say who it is because it's kind of cool when they reveal who he is at the end and you're like, oh yes, he's coming up soon. But this issue also deals with the relationships between all of the characters and sort of examining that classic Spider-Man theme of how close can you let people get to you and not negatively affect their lives, and when you're in a relationship with a woman, in Kane's case. And I liked all of that stuff because you have Kane, like, seeing the woman that he might be involved with here, her ex-boyfriend, and how much of a scumbag he is, and compared to him, where he's like a good man, but he does some of the things he does are terrible. So all of that juxtaposition was really interesting. We have a villain here who's sort of paralleled in that way, where the reason he's doing villainous things is because he's having a troubled relationship. And I liked all of that going on. It was really well done in a sort of over the top, admittedly, but realistic way. Because all of this takes place when Kane is forced to go to a rodeo in Texas. And it's really funny. You have Kane like with a cowboy hat on and stuff, and everyone's like, yeah, Texans don't really dress like cowboys all the time, but we do it once a year at rodeos because it's fun. And I don't know, I thought that was really fun. Overall, I think Scarlet Spider continues to be, ironically, the Spider-Man book that does Spider-Man the best out of all of them. Just in sensibility and theme-wise, and making the character consistent and likable. So, I would recommend Scarlet Spider very highly if you like Spider-Man and are sort of burned out on the direction that it's been going for a little while, like I am. It's really good. And thankfully, even though this is homage to Superior #1, it has nothing to do with that. So, that is very cool.
I'm going to go ahead and talk about Superman #19, which is written by Scott Lobdell and art by Kenneth Rockefort. So this one, Dan, I just wish DC would do this forever so that I could just keep doing this because it's ridiculous. Okay, so glory goes to the victor. And usually it's like this person versus, oh no, who is it? This is just like, it's like ellipsis. What, right? Like glory goes to the victor. ...
Right?
The new god called Orion. All right.
So it's
okay.
I wonder if it's going to have anything to do with that Trinity War thing that they're doing.
I think it's going to have everything to do with that. I really do. Orion has kind of slipped into this book over the last couple issues, and he thinks it reminds me a lot actually of like the 0 Hour thing in the early 90s where like he thinks he's got to kill he doesn't want to kill Superman but he thinks he has for the greater good of the cosmos or whatever. I'm not engaged by this right now. I kept reading this after Hell on Earth because I loved Hell on Earth. Not loving this, and I don't know that I'll be reviewing Superman #20, Dan.
Yeah.
Well, it's hokey, and I like hokey sometimes, but it's... The problem is, it's both hokey and the writing gets on my nerves.
That's
dialogue.
how I've heard people react to Scott Lobdell as a writer in general. Granted, I haven't read like any of his work.
I'm not real familiar with Lobdell. I wanted to give this a shot. I don't think I loved last issue either, but I wanted to try it one more time, and I feel like I've given this about as much of a chance as I'm willing to. I kept making that joke about Jimmy Olsen, and Jimmy Olsen shows up in this, and he says like the most like offensive thing, like he's just like really insulting to who is it that he meet? I want to say he meets. So he meets Diana. Like it's Wonder Woman in disguise. And there's this whole thing going on where like Superman is dating Wonder Woman, but Diana is dating this other guy to keep up appearances and this.
What?
I guess, yeah. And it was all kind of weird and jumbled, and I don't even want to get into it. But I just I wanted to skip past all that stuff, and Jimmy Olsen meets her, and the first thing he says is, "Don't take this the wrong way, but can I have your babies?"
Yeah,
It's like that. And then it all degenerates into my least favorite kind of Smallville episode. So Hector Hammond is like, Hector Hammond with the giant head, right?
Yeah, the Green Lantern villain, right?
Yeah, he's got some kind of a condition that gives him big head disease, and he's in a coma or something, and he's projecting his intellect out toward everything and controlling people. Purposefully or accidentally, I'm not sure, and kind of half controlling them, where like it's that thing where people aren't quite themselves and only Superman is noticing, and Superman is also not being quite himself, but he's the only one of the not quite themselves people that also kind of that can tell that he's not quite himself. Is it because he's Kryptonian? We're not told. I guess it's because his name's on the cover.
Sounds like the superior Superman.
Yeah, it's sort of like that, and so everybody's acting really silly, and he's hallucinating things, and he hallucinates Wonder Woman as almost like TV show Wonder Woman, and it's... Yeah, anyway,
So is Wonder Woman a supporting character in all of Superman's books now because they're dating?
It seems like it. She's showing up a lot, and she's even been showing up in other Superman books. They don't have Superman in them, because we saw her in Supergirl recently, but I'm not complaining about that, because that was actually really great. But anyway, and so then you have this thing with Orion, and he wants to kill Superman because he thinks that he has to, so the universe can live for some reason. And then I guess I'm giving away the cliffhanger, but I don't think it's that big of a deal because we knew he was doing that. I mean, like that was what he was doing last issue. And then it ends. I just love it. Next month, big fight. So if you like,
clever.
What I absolutely could not stand about this issue is the arbitrary nature of when Superman randomly talks to himself to give me exposition and when it's in thought balloons. Yeah.
I hate that.
Well, and what's crazy is if it was just in thought balloons, that's bad enough. I'm not a big thought balloon fan. Just put it in narration boxes and have him, and give him an internal monologue, okay? That's how we do it in fiction. Works just fine in panels. Just do that. I mean, that's how we do it in prose. Just do that. This has him arbitrarily flying around, speaking like gobs and gobs of dialogue, talking to no one in particular, just exposition, and then, pages later, same thing, but in thought balloons. Completely nonsensical, yeah. I couldn't deal with it. I really didn't like that. So anyway, I can't recommend this one. I can't strongly unrecommend this one highly enough. Yeah, sorry guys. The art's okay. There's some good action. It looks good, but otherwise, good action in that the panels look good. What sets up the action is ridiculous. But anyway, so. I don't know. Anyway, that's all I have to say about that book. I probably won't be reviewing that again anytime soon. Dan, go ahead.
My next book is Morbius the Living Vampire #4. And as you can tell, my cover has a very retro horror look to it in that it has a giant water stain on it.
Because Dan put his book on the counter and it had water on it, and he didn't know it had water on it.
Yeah, I was making breakfast and all of a sudden my copy of Morbius was ruined. Not that I was all that disheartened. Anyway, this book is all about Morbius dealing with the repercussions of last issue where he accidentally, which is a weird word to use with this situation, he accidentally ripped somebody's throat out with his fangs.
Okay.
And so, I guess... he's now dealing with that, and he thought that this guy was a bad guy, and I guess he was the one that was stopping some sort of large influence from taking over this poverty-ridden, crime-infested neighborhood, and they act like it's this big, like, territory, like, destined to be, like, this thing that someone wants to take over all the time if there's not, like, some thug, like, keeping everyone in line and making them fear him. And I found that to be sort of weird because this neighborhood is like, I don't see how it's significant if everyone's poor and everyone's just like shooting each other. Like, it's not desirable territory. It's just like a poverty-ridden area of New York. Like, I don't really understand that. And then they have this idea at the end that like Morbius becoming a hobo was also grandly orchestrated by someone. And I'm like, I don't understand why you would, like, orchestrate making anyone a hobo and you have to live in a neighborhood. Like, it doesn't... I guess I could read on to find out why it's like that.
But you're not going to.
But I'm not all that interested.
Are you going to keep reading that book?
I'm probably going to drop it soon, if not after this issue, because I'm going to have to be dropping some things. And this is... probably going to be the first book on the chopping block just because I'm not all that interested. There is a reveal at the end of a Spider-Man villain from the 80s that was cool when he was his original identity, but now that it's probably someone else, I don't really care. He mentioned some things about in some degree relating to the former character's father, the first one that I found interesting, and there's some allusion to maybe it's that guy, which would be weird because he was sort of definitively killed in the 80s. Like, he's shown to be, like, shot and killed. So, it'll be interesting. I mean, it probably won't be interesting to see how that pans out. But, I don't know. I'm not really digging this book right now. It's sort of not really going anywhere fast. Morbius' characterization isn't all that interesting, and I just don't find Morbius being a hobo as a grandly orchestrated scheme by either some criminal boss or supernatural means to be all that interesting. So, I don't know. It seems like it has like these really low key ideas, but is like trying to make them really grandiose and broad sweeping. But for this like really poverty-ridden neighborhood, it's weird.
I think that you would be more okay with that whole story if the title had simply launched at #1 as Morbius the Living Vampiric Hobo. I think if that's what it was called, you'd be fine with it.
Yeah, you're kind of right, actually. that would be amusing for a title.
Because if Hobo was in the title, you'd be more okay with the fact that it is a giantly orchestrated thing that he became a hobo. It's like, oh wow, I have to know how that happened!
I that might be enough to make me, continue buying this book if it was called Morbius the Living Hobo or something.
No, you have to have Vampiric.
Really
Morbius the Living Vampiric Hobo. Okay, now I'm going to start one of my 2 Batman books this week, because as we know, Captain Logan cannot review one Batman book without another Batman book. And today I'm going to talk about, first, Batman the Dark Knight number 19. Dan, people will sometimes ask me what my dream team writer-artist combination is. And usually when people ask you that, they want to know who you'd put together that have never worked together before. And the problem is, I can't do that because I got my dream team right here, and that's Greg Hurwitz and Simon Krasinski back together again. That is a marriage I really don't want to see broken up.
That Penguin mini they did was fantastic.
It was fantastic, and I really don't think, unless I'm made of broken, I don't think Simon Krasinski drew last issue. I think somebody else did. It's weird to suddenly have him aboard in the middle of this arc, because It is jarring, but I don't care because it's Krasinski, and I'm in love with Krasinski's art. And to have the only thing that would be better than Simon Krasinski and Greg Hurwitz writing Batman would be Simon Krasinski and Greg Hurwitz rebooting Spawn. Anyway, so here we have the Guardian of Gotham City. It's not Jimmy Olsen. Sorry. Faces his ultimate failure. That's that one. They're stretching to make these covers happen.
Yeah, that's not a surprise at all.
No, it isn't. Well, anyway, so we have turned what started as a somewhat large-scale plot by the Mad Hatter into a full-blown epic destroy Gotham City plot.
Oh my God. Wow.
I'm kind of surprised by it. The problem I have with it is, after this story, I don't see the point of ever doing Mad Hatter ever again. Now, this isn't over yet, so I don't know how it's going to end, but I only say that because Mad Hatter is such a small-time villain, usually. He has very personal goals, and he's obsessed with this idea of getting together with this idea of Alice. It's not even a person anymore at this point. For where we are in the story especially. And to have this be he brainwashes and controls thousands of people through Gotham City by selling hats to them, which is just fantastic, because we basically took a 60s Batman plot and made it creepy as heck. And
that's awesome.
And at the end of this issue, basically Gotham City is on fire, and it's because of Mad Hatter, and I'm just like, wow, okay. I just don't see the point of ever doing Mad Hatter again after this.
Well, that's the sign of a good story.
It'll never trump that. Well, because it's escalated, it's gotten there. It wasn't the end of the first issue. We've already got Mad Hatter going that far. I think it works. There's this really scary bit toward the end where Mad Hatter has kidnapped all these people, and he's trying to remember the theme in this has been trying to recreate a moment in your past, and having to come to accept, which Mad Hatter never will. This antagonist has had his opportunity for change, and that's why he's the bad guy, because he's still doing it, and it's terrifying. And what he does is what the whole business has been is can you come to the realization and acceptance that you can't force a feeling you had in the past. You can't rekindle that. We change, we grow, we're different people, and we have to move on and look toward the future. We can't just constantly live in the past. And it sounds like a cliche kind of message. It's not in this. It's handled in a really, it just is when you spell it out like that.
I find that interesting that it's being done in a comic book too, where a lot of people would say that about the superhero genre. you can't ever come home again, that sort of idea.
Yeah, it's really interesting, and this is told in somewhat of a classic way, except that it's also kind of, it's horror-esque, and again, we've got a Mad Hatter who can rip people's heads off and stuff. And so where he goes with this is he's trying to recreate that perfect moment. And that's been escalating, just like his Gotham City takeover plot. And what he's doing is he's kidnapping all these people, and he's trying to recreate the time at the like carnival or theme park that was based on Alice in Wonderland that he had with that date with that girl that he remembers as going perfectly, but it actually didn't. It ended okay, but then she didn't really want to keep dating him. She didn't really want anything to do with him again. And so he's also trying to rekindle a moment that never happened, and he's forcing all these people. He's trying to make it exactly the way he remembered it. And he says, you have to look. He puts all these people in different places, and he's got ride operators, and he's got people like food vendors, and he's got everything set up exactly the way it looked. And he says, you have to look happy, and you have to look like this, and you have to look like this. And then this is a bit of a spoiler, but it's impressive. I feel the need to mention it. So skip ahead if you don't want to know anything else about this issue, and then go buy it because it's pretty good. Dan, what he does is he can't get it perfect, so he just kills all of them. He kills these hundreds of people that he put in this. Yeah, and it's nuts. Anyway, it's pretty good. There is a predictable thing that I don't like involving Bruce Wayne's girlfriend, who I love. I like her a lot, but there is this kind of moment where you get the sense that Mad Hatter is going to try to make her his Alice, maybe, and I'm not loving that. We'll see where it goes, though. Maybe he's got a plan for that that's better than what's in my head. But anyway, overall, this continues to be quite good. The art, of course, is fantastic, because it's Krudansky's terrifying horror art with this kind of, it's actually realistic looking as it usually is. It's a little bit more comic book looking here, but it's still all that like really shadowy, almost German expressionistic in places, like backlit stuff. He plays with light a lot. You look at a Simon Krudansky a full page spread, and it's blinding, the parts of it that are lit up, and he likes to try to direct your eyes to certain places, and you have to try to take in the whole picture. And anyway, I really like Krudansky a lot. I want to see him as an artist on a regular Batman book, and as much as I would hate to lose him on Spawn, because I'm buying that book just because I collect it, really, DC, give him an exclusive contract, will you, please, for me? Go ahead, Dan.
Yeah, I was going to say, DC's crazy if they don't try to pick that guy up, and I would say that probably the only reason they haven't picked him up yet is he probably doesn't want to leave Spawn, or if he does, he's involved with that, so because they don't allow you to work at any other company under those contracts to get big books, unfortunately.
Well, sometimes they do. I mean, it's hit or miss. But yeah, you're right. Especially with artists, usually to be a regular on a book for a really long time, you're going to be exclusive. I kind of hope that happens, and then I hope, because I haven't loved some of DC's editorial stuff lately, that they don't also screw him over. But anyway, so yeah, Krudansky on Batman. If nothing else, support this, because these are wonderful, wonderful creators. Go ahead, Dan.
The last book I have on the agenda here is Star Wars Legacy #2. This is again by Karina Pacheco and Gabriel Hardman, the wife and husband team.
So cool.
And yeah, it's really cool. And this issue I really, really enjoyed. The Star Wars Legacy universe wasn't so, this section of the Star Wars universe, this timeline, wasn't something I had really been familiar with before. But I think at least the way they're playing with it in here is really, really interesting, talking about the traditional roles of blacks and whites versus neutrality and the grayness that sort of dominated the prequels a lot of the time, because you had a lot of those political machinations. You don't know who the enemy is. And this is sort of we have a government here that is a compromise between the Empire and the Republic. It's called a triumvirate, and they have an empress, but she's answers to a senate, and it's governed differently. It's a compromise between those two things, like I had said. And even the Jedi and the Sith don't really exist as you think they would anymore. They have these knights, which are neutral Force users, where they're not dark or light.
Interesting.
And we have in this second issue, this had been set up in the first one, but it's continuing here. We have a Sith who infiltrates their ranks, and because they're so used to that neutrality, nobody can pick up on the fact that he's such a black hat, if you know what I mean.
Wow. Yeah.
It's really interesting. It's comments on the sort of traditional roles of, characters, heroes, and villains in fiction, and challenging, if you have this world that's so gray, how do you distinguish anyone from each other? And I really like that idea. It's really interesting, and it's an idea that you don't really see dealt with in Star Wars all that much. It's usually one or the other, and they're doing a good job of balancing like the high concept adventure stuff where you have like Anya Solo, who is the main character in this, with her sidekick, who is Mon Calamari, the same species as Admiral Akbar, which is a lot of fun seeing those two run around together. And you have them like being chased by the government because of this Imperial Knight. They have his lightsaber and they're on the run from him, because that's sort of proof, because he had killed the Knight. The Sith Lord had killed the Knight, taken his lightsaber and taken his place, and having the lightsaber, and they get a recording of him too, would prove that he's a traitor and all that sort of thing. So he's after them, and there's some fun scenes of them like going through some action, but then there's also political machinations that the Sith Lord's doing, and it's done in such a way where it's not boring like the prequels. It's not people like sitting around in the Senate scenes talking about like border disputes and stuff. It's like him like infiltrating government ranks and taking down people with his political power and all that sort of thing. It's really, really interesting stuff. I really, really enjoy this. This and the Brian Wood Star Wars book, if you want to read anything Star Wars, I think those two books capture the feeling of Star Wars the best out of anything Dark Horse is doing. And maybe this book even a little bit more so than the Brian Wood book. I really, really enjoy this one. It's fantastic stuff. Highly recommend this.
Wow. Yeah, that sounds really intriguing.
Yeah.
You've
if
sold
you're a
me.
Star Wars fan in any capacity, I'd recommend checking it out.
Yeah, you sold me on that. I'll definitely at least try that out in trade. That's awesome. Okay, Dan, the last thing I have is Batman Inc. number 10, and I'm not going to show you the gatefold cover till the very end. This one, I'm not going to show you the gatefold, and I'm going to tell people to skip ahead if they don't want to see it, because the gatefold gives away the ending, and the ending is really interesting. I don't like that they did that. Now, this is actually, of these stupid WTF gatefold things they're doing, this is the best one, I think, so far of what I've read. The problem is, again, it gives away the last page, and luckily, for whatever reason, I guess I just wasn't thinking when I read it, and I forgot that this was gatefold, so I didn't even look at the gatefold when I read it, so I wasn't spoiled, luckily. But then I looked at it and I went, oh no, why would they do that? Anyway, so Morrison is very clearly building toward his big climax here. He's very clear. This is really, I don't want to say it's winding down, because it's not winding down, but it's building to an ending, and it feels very much like it's about to be over. And if you have not been reading this, and you go check it out, you're going to see Batman in a place like you've never seen him before. We've got Bruce Wayne wanted by the government for funding Batman. I mean that's what we had. In 9. We had all this really interesting and kind of terrifying politics with Batman, where Batman Incorporated is being blamed for a lot of what's going on with Leviathan trying to take over Gotham City. Now we really get Talia's end game here about how she's going to bring Gotham to its knees and really destroy it. And now we got the government not allowing Batman to operate, and we've got all of Batman Inc. completely underground and having a difficult time, working. We've got these huge posters all over Gotham City of Bruce Wayne's face. He's wanted, not just Batman. So they still don't think he's Batman, but he's wanted for funding Batman. So you basically have Bruce Wayne wanted because he's Batman, but nobody realizes that. I think that's really interesting.
Yeah, that is interesting.
I didn't like the idea of Batman Incorporated that much when it started, because I was bugged by the concept that Bruce Wayne would put himself in the limelight that much in association with Batman. I had a tough time buying it.
And Morrison didn't address it right away.
And now that it's being addressed, I like it a lot more because I like that it's broken down like it has. He's basically made it very clear that this was a bad idea. At least that's how I'm reading it. Now, it might be different when I read the whole thing together, or when it's over, because he's not treating Bruce Wayne like he's been a complete moron this the whole time. He's not treating it like now he's got all this stuff he's got to atone for. It's a lot more like, he was doing the best he can. The government has stepped in. Now he's got to continue doing the best he can. I mean, it's more that sort of a thing.
Like
so he's still the hero. You still root for him. You still support him. But you also question a little bit: was Batman Inc. the way to go? And then what's cool is I'm on the fence about that even because Leviathan. Because it's Leviathan, stretches everywhere, and it's run by Talia, and she's got her tentacles every place, and so could Batman have handled this on his own? I don't know. He needed help, and he needed help around the globe. The question is, did he necessarily have to telegraph it to everybody? That's what I kind of wonder about. But anyway, you've got a really interesting exchange here with Ra's al Ghul, who we've not seen show up all that much in this book, kind of condemning what his daughter's doing, and you've got her, chastising the guy who killed Damian Wayne, and he's trying to set himself up as the real Batman and as her real son, and she's not having any of it. And anyway, it's very involved. It's very cool.
Sounds fascinating though.
Here is the thing I've got to talk about because it's the best idea in the book, but it also I can't talk about it without giving away the ending. So again, skip to the end or stop the video if you don't want to hear this part. I'm gonna spoil this. I've got to tell Dan about it. I'm gonna spoil this. So. This book opens with the words that Batman uses in the origin of Batman. It opens with, "Criminals are a superstitious, cowardly lot. My disguise must be able to strike terror into their hearts." And that narration permeates through the book, and you're not real sure why. We're going back to the original, not just idea of Batman, but the iconography of the Bat. Why? And then all of a sudden, Langstrom shows up. And Langstrom, of course, is the guy who created the Man-Bat serum. And Langstrom he claims I can't remember. People find him again. It's been a couple days. He's found, and he's been working on a new serum, and he claims that it's a serum that is supposed to completely counterbalance the Man-Bat serum, and so he's not doing anything illegal. He's trying to fix it, but that's apparently not exactly what's going on. So, I can't even believe it. So he will become a creature of the night, he shall become a bat, and he does. And,
oh my God.
Yeah, and I won't show you the last page, but basically that happens. And I don't want to show you the last page because it's really cool looking. And you got to remember that Morrison will go this far. Morrison will do these really weird... He'll use mutants, he'll use alternate dimensions, he'll do all these weird things, and he'll find ways to root it in reality, not in reality, but in humanity. He'll find a way to give it emotional weight, and he absolutely does that here. I was really kind of impressed that he went that far. I mean, remember that when we had Return of Bruce Wayne, we saw Bruce Wayne as a caveman with big bat wings, So this feels like kind of the natural direction to take all of that, and it's like...
It's a nice bookend, too, because Langstrom and the Man-Bat thing was a huge part of Batman and Son, which was Morrison's first Arkham book.
Good point.
That's not having read this Batman Inc. stuff lately, just because there's so many great books out there to be reading.
Yeah.
That's one that I definitely want to catch up on eventually, because I was liking Morrison's run up until the relaunch and everything.
Well, he's calling back to stuff. He's clearly not just taken this and ran in a bizarre direction with it. He's bookending his, like you said. I mean, it's connected to all of the rest of his run. I thought that was cool. I don't know where he's going with it, but it seems like Batman's been backed into a corner, and he's got to do something, and that's what he does. Yeah, it's really interesting. It's like it's forced him to re-become Batman in a strange way, because after all, if he can't be Bruce Wayne and he can't be Batman, what's he going to be? He's going to be Batman.
Yeah, he's sort of stripping away, if you think about it, it's like Morrison stripping away Bruce Wayne, taking Bruce Wayne away out of the Batman equation, because he's completely. Like, Bruce Wayne is wanted, his company has collapsed, he doesn't have all the, I mean, he still has money, but he doesn't have that corporate influence anymore. So if you literally put the bat serum into him, you're taking that out of the equation. That's all you have left is the fearful creature.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
I was deeply impressed with this, so check it out. Anyway, Dan, book of the week time. What is your book for the week? Yes.
Well, man, there's a lot of great stuff this week, but I'm going to go with Star Wars Legacy #2. I really enjoyed this. Fantastic stuff. Like I said, can't recommend it highly enough.
Wow, this is tough for me. I think I'm gonna go with the book that I enjoyed the most this week, and that is Deadpool Illustrated #4. I think that's my book of the week. I really enjoyed how this ended. I just love seeing a showdown between Deadpool and Sherlock Holmes. This is great.
Yeah, that's awesome.
I didn't expect that this was going to be a lead up for a new series, and that and something else could totally irritate me. But I was excited about that. I wanted more of this, so I was kind of jazzed about that.
I'm curious if they do another thing after.
That's my pick for this week. Well, everybody, thanks a lot for watching New Acquisitions. Really hope you enjoyed it. Dan, thanks as always for being here with me.
Oh, no problem. Thanks for having me.
And if there's ever anything you'd like to send us to review on the Comic Book Vault, you can always send things to our P.O. Box. That's Geekvolution, P.O. Box 14183, Lenexa, Kansas 66285. We'll see you again next week with more comic book reviews, and we will front load it with the 3 things that we should have done this week that we weren't able to get our hands on. I'm Captain Logan.
And I'm Dan.
See you next time. Happy reading.